Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Yossi Goslin, NBA salary cap analyst. A little too high. There we go. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky for all sorts of NBA salary cap analysis as transactions happen. Now is a good time to do that more than ever as we get closer to the off season. You can follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple for all of my previous live streams, podcasts, salary cap videos. Make sure you subscribe to Third Apron. At some point, I'll probably do a much deeper analysis on the salary cap stuff for the Celtics upcoming offseason, and check out cap sheets. There's going to be a lot of updates as teams do their transactions. So today we are going to discuss the Boston Celtics. They were eliminated last night after pretty, I would say, like ugly series, lots of blown leads at the end of yesterday. Didn't really totally feel close. But this might mark the end of this iteration of the Celtics. Most likely it was already kind of coming that way even before Tatum's injury. And now that might really change the dynamics of how they approach the offseason. Here to discuss with me, a great friend of mine. He's the editor of CelticsWire, and he does a lot of Celtics podcasting. Justin Quinn, Dr. Justin Quinn. So, Justin, how are you? And if this is the end of this exact team, I mean, what are your general sentiments? I'm sure this was a very near and dear team to you.
Well, I'm a little tired, as you might imagine, and the Celtics looked a little tired in Game 6. As you might imagine, the magic went out of the Game 5 series that kind of kept their season alive, and it was kind of expected. They really lost this series in the first two games, in my opinion, of the series. As
Yeah.
a future, there's a lot coming, and let's talk about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, everyone's already talking about what happened. We're not going to really talk about what just happened. We're going to talk about what might happen. So, I think the first place to start is discussing what probably was going to happen, what the roadmap might have been had things gone as a little more expected. Maybe they advanced and Tatum didn't suffer this injury because even if they repeated, okay, maybe they would completely run it back. I would say they probably still do a little modification to the roster because I kind of have an idea of what I already had an idea of what that might be, and it's changed throughout the season as just the Celtics progressed, saw how they've been doing. So I'm looking at their salary cap sheet. The biggest thing is their payroll tax was going to exceed $500 million, and they're going to be over the second apron. I don't think so much the second apron is the issue, more so this almost $300 tax bill. They're going to enter the repeater tax, much higher tax rates now with the new CBA. Obviously, new owner. Who knows exactly how he feels about spending all this much, but regardless, it's just a little untenable. So throughout the season, I jumped player to player in terms of like who that guy might be, who they might move. At first, I think since last year, it seemed like Jrue Holiday just because of his age and the contract he signed. Most recently, Porzingis, pretty obviously, because his health. But when he is dialed in, he was really the missing piece of that 5-out offense that just almost looked unstoppable at times. Didn't really play in last year's playoffs. We discussed on your podcast previously that like they really needed him. They're going to really need him this playoff run to make it through. And yeah, he couldn't really be there. At some point, even I felt like, okay, like maybe Jaylen Brown. But I kind of had the idea that as we got even closer because of Porzingis, his health, how he looked, how he's moving, that was the obvious move. And I was thinking maybe they do something where not only do they trade him to get below the tax, not below the tax, but like to save a bunch of money, but also maybe get like a young center, maybe cost them a pick or two, and you kill two birds with one stone. So that's what I kind of felt like what the approach would be, like mostly run it back and just kind of reset the center position a little bit. Now I'm guessing the general approach is going to be much different. That could involve multiple guys. So, I mean, what do you feel about that? And did you have any ideas of what the Celtics might have, how they might have approached the offseason had, they still been good enough to go next year?
Well, Well, you would be a better expert on the second apron tax penalties than I would, but Wick Grousbeck was pretty transparent in a media appearance last month, I want to say, where he said that he doesn't think any team in the NBA is going to be in the second apron for more than 2 years for the next 2 decades, assuming they keep the same system, which they may not. But that aside, it seems pretty clear that he was telegraphing that one way or another, the Celtics were going to at least get out of the second apron. There's a bunch of ways they could have done that. I mean, people were suggesting that they get rid of Sam Hauser because he could fit right into an exception, mid-level exception that teams are increasingly starting to use to offload money. And there's a whole interesting conversation to have with what could be done with the potential injured player exception that the Celtics are going to end up getting from Jason Tatum. We can talk about that in a little bit. But as to what they were going to do, they were going to trim some money. How they were going to do that could have been Porzingis, as you suggested. The fact that he is constantly hurt or sick in this case, you could look at the glass half full and convince yourself, and maybe a team will, hopefully for Boston, they will, that maybe you can find, that lightning in a bottle kind of a thing with him and get him to contribute in a way that a team needs at a critical moment. But between the weird leg injuries and the weird health issues and just the general unavailability of the last several seasons, it's also easy to understand why a lot of teams will probably want an asset if they do take on his contract, even considering the fact that it is a pretty large expiring. You might find a team that is desperate to shed some salary, but in that case, you're going to get back probably a player who maybe runs an extra season for less money or two. Maybe they can contribute, maybe they can't, but whatever you're getting is not going to be a starter caliber player. So what Boston was going to do is only going to be, it's not going to be better in terms of what they get from him now after seeing what just happened, which was like he basically became their third center overnight, and that is not a good thing.
Right. So we'll get to him a little later as far as like how exactly that might play out, because I think that's probably the most likely scenario. Everyone watching probably feels that way. But I want to kind of start top to bottom, because I think you kind of have to look at just about everybody, and I mean everybody. And obviously, the more important they are, the younger they are, the least likely. Obviously, Jason Tatum, he's not going to play next year. The
Oh, he
only
might. He might. I don't think he should. I mean, if he wants to, then no one's going to stop him, and probably no one should. But there are some people who are saying that a all star game ish, in terms of timing, return is not off the table. I don't think it's going to matter to his season though, based on
yeah.
what we've seen from players when they return.
So I was thinking, okay, what is there like some chance, and probably a very tiny, tiny chance that they would trade Tatum if there's a team out there willing to give up more than they probably should for Tatum, like as like a buy-ish low because he's injured, not going to play next year. Even then, as I went through that scenario, I just find it. I still think the Celtics wouldn't do it. I think they'll want to keep him and see through this injury and get back into it hopefully in 27. So just right there, just wanted to get through that quickly. Jaylen Brown,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
after Luka Doncic, I don't think we can ever look at things and say that it'll never happen. But yeah, I tend to agree.
yeah, it would take a lot, and I don't think that's quite out there. Jaylen Brown, I think, is going to be a lot more of an interesting conversation, because I think he's going to be in a lot of people's fake trades this summer. But first we should say, like, okay, what are the Celtics planning to do? Once Tatum had this injury, I had an emergency pod. We had Sam Quinn on, not Quinn, yeah, Sam Quinn on, a different Quinn. I got thrown off by the Quins, and
Happens.
and I said they're gonna have like somewhat of a gap year, but that doesn't mean they're gonna be bad or tank or bottom out. I don't think they could really do that. Like as long as they have Jaylen Brown, and like I would say, and especially knowing how the East is shaping up to be next season, like they could still get home court advantage if Tatum misses the whole
Yeah.
year, like truly. So my feeling is that, yeah, they're going to have somewhat of a gap year where they are going to work on lowering the tax bill and reestablishing, reshifting pieces. So they'll have like, a new core around Tatum and probably Brown as well. So a lot of people will probably put him in fake trades because they think, okay, maybe he doesn't want to be there because they're not going to be good. I think or someone in the chat said like he might be the type to ask out. Okay, if he asks out, maybe that's something that they'll probably have to like seriously explore. But he's also got 4 more years left on the Supermax deal. It's like 5 years, 280 something. So I do feel like if there is some type of Jaylen Brown discussion, you got to think of, well, like forget about how the team's going to be. Like, think about more so the player he is and the contract he has. Is this a guy that the Celtics feel is going to age well with this contract, look better? Because I'm a little lower on it. He's I believe he's only a one-time All-NBAer and just happened to get All-NBA in the exact time he needed to qualify for this. I feel like there's going to be somewhat of a reckoning soon for like these types of players, like Cat, also same thing, like just Devin Booker, like just making it. And then like, these contracts are, I think they're going to get a little more scrutinized. So if the Celtics,
I don't think you are wrong about that. Just because of his injury history, what we have seen from him at the end of the season, if he continues that, if we see a version of him that looks more like what Jason Tatum did for this team that we saw in Game 5, where he had a career high 12 assists, if he can become that kind of a player and start making better decisions when he is like the point of attack distributor, then I could actually see that becoming something of a more valuable contract, because that'll give him something that would offset the inevitable loss of athleticism that's going to come with constant knee issues, right? But if not, then he could become a bit of an albatross towards the end of that contract.
Yes. So what I'm trying to get to is that I think the Celtics like only consider trading him if they have that opinion that like they feel like it's not gonna age that well. He just those kind of factors. And then at the same time, I think you got to get like a pretty big haul. You need a combination of multiple first round picks, established young players and or veterans, and save a lot of money. And I haven't seen if that's really out there. And at the same time, I don't even know. I doubt that's something the Celtics are seriously thinking about. So, I would guess that they want to keep Jaylen now, especially that with Tatum out. I think they probably feel like they can put a pretty good team, because if they're not going to bottom out, okay, go next year around Brown. Maybe you can look at it as a situation where, you know what, maybe in the long run, this will make him a better player. Maybe this will make him, he'll really have a chance to lead the team for a whole year. What does that do? How much value does that bring going forward? So although next year, yeah, it's going to be somewhat of a gap year as they just figure out what the next team's going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and say pretty confidently, I don't think Jaylen Brown's going to get traded, or more so, I don't think the Celtics are going to seriously consider trading Jaylen Brown this summer. They'll be able to check off all their other boxes by trading some of their other guys. And that's mainly like, what are the boxes? Financial stuff, getting maybe some high upside players that can help in the short term.
Definitely agree. As far as him asking out, he was telling Celtics fans that they should be excited about the future and not be worried about next season, which is not exactly telegraphing the kind of tone from someone who's about to ask out, but you never know what's going on behind the scenes either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think we'll find out pretty soon. If there's nothing, then yeah, he's probably going to stick around. But I think if I were him, I'd want to stick around at this point. You really have a shot to lead the team, and there's a lot of people doubting him that get to prove him wrong. So then we start to get to like more realistic territory. We go down. So I want to look at a player I also think is unlikely, but you definitely worth a good discussion. Derek White. And I think there's a I wouldn't say it's like a strong case, like they should move him, but like a pretty compelling one if everything comes together. He's just finished his 8-year, but a little older than what typical 8-year vets are. He's about to turn 31. He's about to kick his new extension is about to kick in, paying him about a little over $30 million a year on average. And I'm sure, like with Jaylen Brown, there might be concerns around the league of how that contract might age, depending who you ask. So if you're moving him, one, again, same thing. You got to be convinced that that contract might not age that favorably, but also it might be maybe things are going to go downhill. But then also there's got to be somewhat of an overpay out there. Like if there's a team that really is going to offer like a lot more than anyone's even considering which is like fair for Derek White, okay, then you have a discussion. So I'm just thinking, I remember last year, the Rockets, they were rumored. I remember it was like a report saying that guys they were interested in was Donovan Mitchell and Derek White. So like hypothetically, what if the Rockets offered something like the number 10 pick? Because I don't think they're going to want that pick. And like one of their young guys for Derek White. That's now you're starting to get to like, wow, that's a lot of high upside value for an older vet. That's something I feel like, you definitely seriously have a discussion about. Yep. So I don't know if that's out there. I'm just throwing like the type of offer I think that might get the wheels moving on that. And so it's just like an opportunistic type thing. I don't know if that's out there. And again, I made that argument for Jaylen, but this opportunistic part, it's like a lot more applicable to Derek White, I'd say.
I don't disagree. I don't think it's very likely. Just for the same reason that trading away someone like Jaylen Brown, it's really hard to find guys that fit in the system, that know the system, that are going to work in the system, and are going to be on contract for the duration of the period of time that you expect Jason Tatum to be with a team and ostensibly contending or working towards getting a contending roster back again, which I think is going to be the next 2 seasons. Not really the season after. I think they'll be more or less where they want to be after the full range of trade cycles. I think they're going to be making moves to this offseason and at the trade deadline and to start over the next offseason to get back to where they want to be and transform the roster from what it is now to what it will be by then. But it's really hard to find these kinds of players and then have it actually work. It's one thing to do the Daryl Morey kind of approach, like just get the talent on the roster and figure out to fit later. But particularly for an organization like Boston that is kind of the antithesis of that approach, it could happen. I just don't expect it to.
Yeah, I would say that, and that gets to my next point, which is why ultimately when you look at what the Celtics are going to do, it does just fall down to the same suspects, Jrue Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, because they're probably going to be able to fulfill their financial goals and maybe even like get just, not like get the pieces for the long-term next iteration. That's going to take some time, but at least get enough guys to prepare for next year and be somewhat competitive. So yeah, let's get into like the main 2 guys. I guess we'll start with Jrue. Or I'm trying to decide, who do I want to start with, Jrue or Porzingis?
I think Jrue is more likely to be moved fairly easily, but I don't know if he's going to be moved over the summer.
Yeah. So yeah, let's start with Jrue, but it's kind of just both him and Porzingis because ultimately, the biggest thing, both guys making just over 30 million. Celtics roughly about 24 over the second apron. I'm looking at my salary sheets, but this is like my version where, here's what happens when the Celtics fill up the roster, get the 14 guys. So, it's a little higher. So basically, I think they're going to try to save, something like at least 20 million, get below the second apron, but mainly like significantly reduce that tax bill. And I guess the one thing as far as, what does Tatum's injury do if you're not going to consider doing like a bigger retool that involves Brown and White? I would say now you're probably a little more motivated to like not only get below the second apron, maybe even get below the luxury tax.
Yeah.
And there's a couple reasons for that, but I'll get to that a little later. But I think they should be able to fill out, meet their financial goals, whatever they are, whatever they decide it is, just by trading Holiday and Porzingis. So for those two, just because of that, I would say they're Brown and Derek White probably stay. I don't think they'll need to trade them to figure out their financial stuff. So Holiday, I don't think they'll have a problem moving him, even though he signed this extension, 4 years, 135 million. I was wondering why they didn't like decline it. They could have started in the high 30s, made it lower, would have made it a little more valuable. But either way, it's gonna go up to like the high 30s, I think. So I don't think there'll be a shortage of teams for Jrue. But I think they're not gonna recoup what they gave up to get him. They gave up
No.
a 29 first round pick, that Warriors pick that turned out to be pretty good, Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, which I guess, retroactively just kind of neutral guys, but still like those two picks. I don't know if they're even getting a pick for him, or at least like not like a valuable one. I don't think there's a team gonna trade like a future far out one like that. I think they're probably gonna get neutral value at best. But a lot of the value, keep in mind, is going to come in what will probably be some the financial aspect. That could be now not a lot of cap space. There's really only one, the Nets. Maybe they could be involved somehow, but they don't need a team that has like a big trade exception or like some mechanism to absorb a guy to make a very unbalanced trade. They just got to get as many teams involved as possible. Like the bigger you make the trade, the less money you can potentially send out. So I'm thinking most likely like it just the value you're getting. Maybe you get like a guy who can play, but you're mostly saving money in the short and long term.
Yeah, I see them getting a playable rotation player back plus some cap relief. If they get like a nice second round pick out of this as well, then I think they did okay.
Yep. No, definitely some seconds. They do already have some like solid draft capital for this year. They got the 28th pick, and the 31st overall pick. So like the first pick in the second round, that's arguably more valuable than the 28th pick.
Yeah,
because
non-guaranteed.
And with the second round pick exception, it's like, okay, you're picking 3 spots below. You'll probably get whoever you're targeting in that range, and you pay him cheaper than the rookie scale amounts.
Yeah, and if they don't work, then you're not nailed to them either.
Yeah. So I bring those up because then we get into Porzingis, who, as we alluded earlier, probably at best neutral value, but and even though he's only got 1 year left, that 30.7 million amount kind of high. So they might have to give up a little something to get off him. I don't know if either of those picks in this year's draft will be enough. I think if you're the Celtics, you're hoping at least one of those would be, because if I think if you can just have one of those picks, I don't know if they need both of those. They should already have a pretty full roster. They'll probably get some through whatever moves they get. They could probably end up getting even more young guys. Because not just knowing the uncertainty, I don't think it makes sense to dip into future draft capital to get off a guy like Porzingis, unless you are also bringing back that high upside center we talked about. Maybe that trade is still on the table. Like one guy I'm thinking about, the Hornets. They want to trade Mark Williams. I don't know if I wouldn't trade like a future far out pick with Porzingis, but maybe there's something where that's the kind of trade. I'm not saying like particularly they should be focused on that type of player, but he is on a rookie contract. Like you save like 30 million right there and you get like a high upside center. Obviously you don't have that lethal 5-out stretch anymore, but that could take a while to find that type of big man anyways. So
one thing I think that we should mention too is that injured player exception. I don't expect, and I think you probably agree, that they're not just going to absorb someone like Time Lord, for example. Chris Forsberg wants to see come back with that. The amount of money that's going to add to the contract structure of the Celtics, I think, is unrealistic. But what they could do is something they've done in the past, which is fold some of a trade for one of these two players we've just been discussing into that, and then create a future trade exception for the season after, where that's where they look to get the replacement for Porzingis with some kind of a big name.
Yes. So yeah, we just described some like just trade exception creativity. Like the Grizzlies last year, they traded Steven Adams. They took who did the Rockets give up to get him? Was it Oladipo? Yeah, they took Oladipo into their injury exception. They create a new like full trade Steven Adams trade exception. So I would say that is if they use that DP, that's probably the best use of it, because if they do save enough money in a trade where one, they get enough roster pieces to just kind of fill up the roster. Also, the other thing we didn't even talk about, now with these potential trades saving money, they were already going to be at $500 million roster without re-signing Al Horford, without re-signing Luke Cornett.
Yep. Now
you realistically open up the possibility of bringing back both those guys if they save enough money. And that alleviates the pressure of having to get some new center now, because those two still make a very formidable big man rotation. So at least for next year, like you have like a stopgap rotation, and then you still have time to figure out, because it's like I said, it's going to take time to find like this new exact core. It might take years. It's not going to happen, and I'd be surprised if they're able to like completely reinvent the core in one season. So yeah, they could bring back those guys, but yeah, hopefully they just don't have to give up too much on to give up Porzingis. Maybe there's a team out there that, still
only takes one.
Maybe there's a team out there that will just take them. Here's just like a couple cheaper players. Who knows? If the Celtics can just get savings without giving up anything, that'd be great. So, as I look at their cap sheet one more time, I think they can get pretty creative with the trades. We kind of ran through everybody. As far as looking into next season, then, like, what kind of developments then? Like I'm looking at Peyton Pritchard. I'm looking at Baylor Shireman. Like, do you see, like, how do you see like their development, their growth? Like, do you have any other thing you're kind of looking forward that like might be kind of like a positive because of how different everything's going to be?
Well, I think for those Celtics fans who really like the end of bench, the so-called stay ready crew, you're going to be seeing a lot more of them. And I think you're going to be seeing the Celtics use their two-way slots, potentially unsigned draft participants that will hopefully eventually you will find some diamonds in the rough that can be future Sam Hausers. Sam Hauser, I'm undecided. I was more on the fence where if they're going to try to run it back, then that's the kind of guy they really want to hang on to because he's so cheap. But if they also, particularly if they have trouble getting off of, for example, Porzingis, he's someone they can just be like, hey, you want a Sam Hauser? And there are plenty of teams with mid-level exceptions who will be like, yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll take him. Because, he can do a lot for teams that are trying to contend or at least get towards contending. The savings he represents is an easily movable contract. So be ready for a lot of roster churn on the lower end of the rotation.
Yeah, that's another guy. And you mentioned the mid-level exception. He's got a $10 million salary. Yeah, he could just fit into some team's mid-level exception. That's just another way to save money. So I think we kind of touched on everything. Just kind of like, this is just more so like we're kind of speculating, like they're going to do something. We're just kind of going through the case of each one, which is not how I imagine we'd be talking about the Celtics for their upcoming off season. But here we are, and it's really about the money, like first and foremost. So that's the thing. Like, if the Celtics don't bring back any guys that excite you, you got to consider that a lot of the value, like the majority of the value they're going to get back in these trades, are the savings. So I mentioned the repeater tax. They'll have been in the luxury tax. Now they've just been in the luxury tax for 3 years in a row. So the rule is when you're in the tax in 3 or 4 seasons, you enter the repeater tax. You become designated repeater payer. Now you have higher tax rates. So they're entering it. The Tatum injury now kind of really complicates maybe it won't. Maybe again, we don't know what the appetite to spend will be. That's still to be seen. But I would guess that the Tatum injury does somewhat make that a little more of a priority. It might, because
Provides
starting
cover if nothing else.
because this season, the CBA is now implementing changes in the tax structures. The deeper you are in the tax, it's even higher rates now. That's a big reason why their tax bill is so high. Like their tax bill is going to be higher than their projected payroll if they run this back. So because of it's 3 and 4 years, they might want to consider getting below the tax for the next couple of years to reset that repeater clock. So then in the future, once they do have the team that that they think is ready to contend and it's reoriented around Tatum and Brown, then they'll be a little more equipped to pay the tax again. Because now these numbers are just ridiculous. But it would take to reset the clock a little bit to make it for the Celtics to make it so they don't have to be paying these repeater rates. They got to duck the tax for the next 2 seasons, just for the 28 season, for them to have just the normal tax rates they've been dealing with. So I don't know if they're going to go that low. I don't know if that's going to be a priority, because right now they're about $45 million above the tax.
They're not getting there easy.
Jrue and Porzingis combined for 63 million. I'm sorry. Yeah, 63 million. So you're talking about 2 very unbalanced trades, maybe a third if needed, if they really want to get there. So I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're going to prioritize, saving that much money to reset their clock. Time will tell. We'll see how the new ownership group feels about that.
It feels like an almost impossible. Yeah, it feels like an almost impossible needle to thread to contend with Jason Tatum or the other players we've been mentioning who we think are going to stick around, and to save this money, even if you get rid of both of the likely candidates and Sam Hauser, you're still not quite there realistically, unless you, like you said, it's a very unbalanced. And in a league with virtually no, what would Brooklyn want to do with any of this? There'd have to be a bigger trade going on, I think, for this to happen. And it's almost impossible to see those things coming.
Right. But these are just important elements to keep in mind, because don't be surprised if they get really aggressive in trying to save money. Again, we don't know what that's going to be. It's an impossible question to answer, but that's just something to keep in mind. Maybe that's going to be most of their value, aggressively saving money, because if they're going to pay the tax, they're going to want in the future, they're going to have to pay some tax in the future, most likely, if they're going to continue building around Tatum and Brown, 2 guys making 35% max. I don't think there's another team with 2 35% max guys. So it's going to be
a question we haven't touched on. I just want your opinion on this as a non-Celtics fan. Where do you think the odds are they just blow it up entirely?
I would say something like 10%, because as I touched on, that would mean they're also trading Tatum, and that probably means that there's a team out there willing to give up real stuff right now, willing to burn a year with him most likely not playing or missing most of the season, and giving up some real stuff. I don't recall really any type of transaction like that. I guess we can circle back to the Steven Adams trade, where the Rockets took an injured Steven Adams recently, but he ain't no Jason Tatum.
The Durant signing was kind of, but that's the closest we got.
That's what I was about to say next, but that was a free agency signing. Yeah, it became a sign and trade for the help with the salary cap machinations. But I can't really think of a team. I don't know if anyone can remember where they traded real stuff to get an injured player who's going to miss such an extended period of time. That would be, and that alone, like I said in the very beginning, that would be also a very big decision from the Celtics. I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. They'd have to get some like immediately some like real established young players, like maybe some like very high lottery picks this year, it's got to be a very hard offer to decline for them to go that direction. So yeah, I'd say 10% at best.
Yeah. Yeah. You might need some riot police also.
Yeah. No, even if he was going to miss 2 years, I wonder if, I feel like, yeah, there's still going to be a lot of resistance to actually trade him. So yeah, I expect him to be a part of the next iteration of the Celtics team. I think the Celtics will still be pretty good next year. And how the roster looks like, yeah, I think it's going to be meaningfully different than what we just saw. So we'll see what happens. We've got about a month and a half, or 45-ish days until the draft. I think we might start to get some clarity by then. But I think that's about everything we've got. I think just like a general outlook at just how significant this offseason could be and how significant these changes might look like. So Justin, thanks for joining. This was great.
Anytime.
You got anything we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I did just hear that the Celtics wanted to look at Cooper Flag, which probably means absolutely nothing.
Well, that might be the Tatum trade that I'm alluding to.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That one, maybe you won't need the riot police quite as much.
Maybe.
Yeah. I saw that. I saw the that they interviewed him. But thanks, Justin. Everyone, make sure you're following him on Twitter and Blue Sky at Justin Quinn with 3 N's. You can check out all his work on CelticsWire, and he, I believe you might be having some podcasting news coming up.
Yeah, the Celtics Lab podcast is no more, but stay tuned. We will have something coming very soon.
All right, so be on the lookout for that, everyone. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky on my name, you'll see Goslin. Same thing on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You can see all my previous podcasts. Make sure you're subscribed to Third Apron. Now's the best time of the year to be subscribed. I'm going to get into just really more into the minutia of the Celtics offseason and probably discuss like how much they get into like the actual savings, like how much is required to get off to save a certain amount, and kind of give some projections what the payroll could look like. That'll probably come up in the next week or two. And as you guys can see on the top, I got the Sports Business Classroom logo. It's a networking educational program in Summer League. Check the link in the description. There's a lot of good information on that, including a promo for those who